Welcome to our show. I'm your host, Attorney Michelle Conti, and today we are fortunate to have Michael Osilka with us. I have a lot of clients who come into the office and ask about planning for the future. What can they be doing now? What can they be doing better? And who better to speak on that than Michael? So welcome, Michael.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle. I'm happy to be here.
So for those of us who are unaware what longevity planning is, can you explain to us what that actually means?
Sure. Longevity planning, it's not a new concept, it's just a new wording. Basically, it's a comprehensive, holistic approach to planning, for your financial security for the future. It addresses all the necessary issues to secure that security. For example, your retirement planning, and the distribution planning thereafter. Investments, Medicare, life insurance, final expense insurance, long-term care insurance.
Now, do you find that most people, like my clientele, are apprehensive to talk about end-of-life planning, whether it be long-term care, life insurance, final expenses?
Yes, without a doubt. I think that's that's just human nature. People want to think about pleasant things. Typically, when you're talking about the mortality or finality of our lives, that's typically unpleasant for many people. But it's really needed. Most people are in denial, to be honest with you, about anything that might happen to them, in the future, because most reasonable people, although they expect and want to live a long life, they expect the worst to happen to somebody else.
Absolutely.
That's just the way we're wired as humans.
Very true. So explain to us, before we get into probing questions, I have a lot of questions for you. How did you get into this? That's one of the questions, the first question people ask me is, why would you get into handling the estate when somebody has passed? It is the depressing side of it. But explain to us, let's start at the beginning. How did you get involved in longevity planning?
Well, I first started out as a long-term care planning specialist.
Okay.
And I had a personal experience with my mother. And that's typically the epiphany for most people when it comes to long-term care. So I saw, the impact that it had, not only on her, but on myself and, and the family. Because, well, with long-term care, specifically, it's not as much as the person who ends up being in care, although that's certainly important.
Right.
It's more of the financial, emotional, and physical, impact and consequences on those we love the most, our family.
Right.
Because they're affected. People don't realize this, but they're affected probably more than the person in care in many ways.
Right. So what is the first bit of advice that you would give to a new client? If I came in or my mom came in, somebody came in and asked you, where should we start? Where's that starting ground for you?
Well, the starting point is asking a couple of questions. Okay, is what I have what I think I have?
Right.
Okay, and understanding. Is what I have what I need? And then, are there any weak links, within that? Because a weakness in any one area can affect the overall effectiveness, of your planning. Now, for example, I work with a number of financial advisors that I refer out when it comes to the retirement planning or the investments or distribution.
Okay.
I personally specialize in the Medicare, in the insurances, life, final expense, and most importantly, long-term care. So those are that I focus on.
So I think, acting as a client, I think that most people understand what life insurance is, right? So when we pass, that money can be used for final expenses or as a way to pass along wealth, tax-free, to our loved ones. Legacy planning, we call it. But what I often find is my clients are very heavily secured in retirement assets, let's say 401k, IRA, and I'm not sure if that's your experience. But when I do a review of their assets, what they have, most of them are in retirement. And they think that that's okay. Now, again, I'm not a financial advisor, but I know well enough that if you need access to that cash, you're going to pay tax on it. So let's start there. So if I came in, what other avenues would you recommend? Let's talk about long-term care planning, the nursing home care. People often shy away from that, but in a nutshell, what does that mean and what can that include? And as a follow-up question, and I can ask it again, but what if I purchase long-term care insurance, but I don't ever need it? So let's go through
Sure.
and see what that looks like.
And those are great questions. First of all, I think when it comes to long-term care, one has to accept the fact that it could happen to them.
Right.
The given accepted statistic is once we reach the age of 65, 70% of us are going to need some type of care in our lifetime.
Okay.
And that can be anywhere from the 2 months that my mom spent in a nursing home, or the 8 to 10 years, which is the average lifespan of an Alzheimer's patient.
My grandfather,
After
perfect
diagnosis.
example, 8 years in a facility.
Exactly. And that's another issue too, letting people know that when people think of long-term care, they immediately think about nursing home.
Right.
Long-term care is not a place, it's an event. It's an event that could happen to anyone at any age,
Right.
For any number of reasons. And there are a number of venues for care. Home care, the majority of care begins and ends in the home, and no one wants to leave their home typically. No one
Right.
chooses to go
Right.
into a community, whether it be assisted or skilled nursing.
Right.
So the first thing is to accept the fact that it could happen to you, and then understand what the consequences might be on those that you love, and what you have in place currently that might be able to address the financial issues of long-term
Right.
care, and what else might be needed to complete that.
And if I interject, and I know that we're not focusing strictly on money, but people, it amazes me how many people are shocked when I explain to them, on average, the cost of long-term skilled nursing is X. $8,000, $10,000, $12,000.
Correct.
I've seen it as high as $16,000 a month. I've seen it as low as $7,000 a month. It just depends. And I think it depends on which level you're actually receiving. But it baffles my mind. There's two things, and I always say this in our office. It shocks me that people don't know what they've accumulated. So we have our clients fill out an estate planning questionnaire to see what it is exactly they have. The amount of people who don't know what they have shocks me. Number two, with the amount and the percentage of people who either need long-term care in their home, as you mentioned, or at a facility, they're not educated on what that picture looks like. And when they get that first bill, and maybe it is $8,000 or $10,000, it blows their mind.
Oh, without a doubt.
And I'm sure most of your job is educating people.
Exactly. I take a consultative versus a transactional approach. It's all about education.
Right.
Everyone deserves long-term care education. Everybody needs to have a long-term care plan.
Right.
Whether or not insurance is part of that plan, that's another question, and it should be an informed decision based upon a number of factors. You're correct about the cost. $20, $25 an hour currently for home care, and there could be daily or weekly minimums. The median cost for assisted living today is about $40,000 a year, and as you mentioned, skilled can range. I mean, it could be $110,000 a year.
Right.
But the key is for people in their boomers or even healthy seniors that are older. Those are today's costs. Costs are expected to double every 15 to 20
Right.
years. So when you're looking to plan for that financial aspect of it, you have to look at those kind of numbers. And when you tell somebody it could be over $200,000 to for 1 year in a skilled nursing home, they get the deer in the headlights look.
Absolutely.
But I'm old enough to know that when I first started driving, gas was $29.9.
Yeah.
And I've seen it go to almost $4 twice in my lifetime.
Right.
So those are the type of numbers that you have to look at. Your second point about what if I don't use it, I lose it. Well, first of all, the only insurance that always pays off is life insurance.
Okay.
If you never have an accident, you don't get anything from your auto, or your homeowners, or your health insurance, if you think about that. However, there are different types of risk transfer solutions when it comes to long-term care. There are your traditional long-term care policies
Okay.
that many people may be aware of or have.
Okay.
And some of those policies offer a return of premium rider that in the event that you don't use it or only use part of it, you know, part of the premium or all of the premium can go to a beneficiary.
Okay.
Okay? There are also life insurance products. They call them life hybrids or asset-based products, where it's basically a life insurance policy with a long-term care rider that allows you to draw a percentage of the death benefit on a monthly basis to pay for care.
Okay.
And then, again, in the event that you don't use it at all, you have the full death benefit to go to a beneficiary.
Okay.
Or if you only use partial, then the remainder goes to a beneficiary. One thing I do want to mention about traditional policies before I forget, there's something called the Pennsylvania Long-Term Care Partnership.
Okay.
And many people are aware of Medicaid and the spend down that's required.
Right.
And a lot of times that creates chaos and havoc in a family because they expect
Very
it
true.
to pass, you know, assets or to pass the house to the grandchildren
Right.
or whatever the case might be. Well, in short, the PA-LTC partnership is if you have a properly designed plan, you have dollar for dollar asset protection against Medicaid spend down in the amount that the policy paid out. So for example, if you have a policy and over the course of your care, it paid out $200,000.
Now, is this a long-term care policy or a life insurance policy?
No, these are strictly your traditional long-term
Okay.
care policies.
Okay.
The life hybrids or their short-term indemnity policies, they would not qualify.
Okay.
But a traditional policy, so for example, if your policy paid out $200,000 for your care, and now the family begins to self-pay,
Right.
and now one's in a skilled nursing, and well, let's see what Medicaid might do.
Right.
Typically, you know, you have to spend down all your assets to a minimum to qualify for Medicaid.
Yes.
In this example, because your policy paid out $200,000, you could shelter $200,000 of your total assets, including the home or any other countable assets that would be spent down, and then only spend down the difference.
Now, would that work for a married couple, or is that, do you have to be married? Can you be a widow at that point? A widow,
it
single?
could work for anyone who has a properly designed plan. And in the case of a married couple, each spouse would, if they both use each spouse would have $200,000
To shelter.
protected.
Yes.
So the family, in essence, would have $400,000 of protection against Medicaid spend down.
Now, if I was listening to you and I'm intrigued, how do you define what a proper plan is?
Okay, well, in terms of for the partnership itself, with a long-term care policy, whether it's traditional or a life or whatever, you're buying a bag of money
Right.
that will provide a dedicated stream of income to help pay for your care. Now, in the case of traditional policies, there are different riders, and most important is an inflation rider, and that's what you need to qualify for the partnership.
Okay.
And in an inflation rider, let's say you start out with a $100,000 pool of money. At 3% compound inflation, that will grow by 3% and double in about 23 years. So
Okay.
then you'll have $200,000.
Okay.
And the type of inflation, whether it be compound or simple, is designated by your age range.
Okay.
And that's how a policy, well, first of all, the company itself has to be a partnership certified policy. And all the policies that I work with are.
Okay.
So then it's just a matter of someone selecting the appropriate inflation component for their age range that would qualify it for partnership.
And you assist your clients with that?
Oh, yes. Again, you know, I hold educational seminars. I do education one-on-one. I work with groups, associations. And my passion is to educate. Everyone, as I said, everyone needs to understand this. And then it's also, there's never a charge or a consultation for me to meet with anyone or any group to educate.
That's wonderful. Now, do you recommend a certain age when people should really start considering looking into the long-term care or longevity plan?
Well, frankly, it's not too early to think about it even in your 40s or early 50s. Long-term care used to be considered a senior product.
Right.
Okay. But now, industry-wide, it's in the low 50s age-wise of people who are purchasing it. However, long-term care is just not about getting old. Over 40% of the people that are in care now are under the age of 65.
Wow.
If you think about it, I mean, people would, Christopher Reeves with his equestrian accident,
Right.
Michael J. Fox with Parkinson's,
Right.
Pat Summitt, who had early onset Alzheimer's. So it is really part of life planning. And to take that a step further, when it comes to premiums for long-term care, and this is regardless of the type of policy, it's based on 4 things. It's based on your age. It's based on your gender. Women will pay more than a male at the same age because you live longer.
Right.
If you visit any care community or even a senior high-rise,
Right.
95% or
Are
more
women.
are women.
Right.
It's based on your plan design, how big of a bag of money that you want, riders, bells and whistles. Most importantly, it's based on health.
Okay.
These are medically underwritten. And if you think about it, you're never as young and as healthy as you are today.
Today, absolutely.
So it'll
if-
never be as inexpensive.
So if I were to get a policy now,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, in 10, 15, 20, 30 years, do I have to undergo any additional medical testing the older I get?
No, once you own a policy, the only way it could be terminated is for lack of payment.
And what happens if I'm unable to pay, if I'm unable to make that payment?
Well, in that case, it depends. With a traditional policy, it would terminate. You have like 60 days from your due date.
And do you get any of those premiums back upon
Not
termination?
in a traditional policy,
Okay.
no. However, in life insurance products that, and usually these are whole life or universal life policies that have the rider,
Right.
There's an internal growth or cash value, and many times you build up enough cash value
Right.
within that policy that in the event that you might not be able to pay that premium that time, the cash value or the internal money can help
Can pay it.
pay for that.
Yes.
Can help pay for that.
And I think that's something that a lot of people aren't aware of. And when possibly the older they get, the more concerned they are that maybe they're just on a Social Security budget each month. And that's something that we try to educate our clients as well, that if a month gets tough or 2 months get tough, there should be accumulated cash in there to help you out.
In certain types of plans, yes, that's
Right.
correct. And also, whenever I work with an individual or a couple, I mean, we address that. It's important not only to be able to pay your premiums, while you're working, but also in the
Right.
future, and that's something that's addressed. Do you feel comfortable based upon what your retirement is, what your planned monthly distribution is in your mind,
Right.
that you're planning on with your Social Security, can this, be it? And also, one way of looking at it is a concept called return on investment. For example, where you have and let's pick $100,000.
Okay.
You have $100,000, it's generating 5%.
Okay.
And typically, you're just rolling that 5% over. Once you get into retirement, you may start to use that for distribution.
Okay.
But if in your mind and in your financial plan, you say, okay, that 5%, out of that $5,000, the first thing is my premium for my long-term care policy that's going to come out of that.
Right.
I won't touch it for any other reason. So what you find is that the interest on your retirement is paying for your long-term care policy that protects
Right.
your investments in your
Right.
retirement.
Right. It makes sense, absolutely. But I know that one of at least my clients' fears when I hear them talk is they've heard from a friend of a neighbor or whomever that long-term care is very expensive. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to touch on that. So explain to us, how expensive is it?
Well, you know, it's not inexpensive, but relative to the cost of care, it's
Right.
a great investment. And again, it's hard to say, and I have this all the time when I do a group talk. Well, you know, I'm 57 years old. What's it going to cost me?
Right.
I have no idea because I don't know what your needs are. I don't know what your health is. It's like, I want to buy a car. How much is it going to cost?
Right.
Well, you know, do you want a Hyundai?
Right.
Or do you want a
Bentley.
Jaguar or a Bentley? I
Right.
mean, so,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
and that's where I work with people on an individual basis, you know, to give them their options. But the first thing I'll ask for is, I have a 3-page health questionnaire that I ask them to fill out. Because before I could even quote them anything, whether it be a traditional policy or a life policy, I have to understand what their health is.
Right.
Because do they have a wide variety of options because of their health, or are they limited? And if I can say, just because you have high blood pressure, diabetes, osteopenia, porosis, stents, bypasses, even cancer survivors, do not necessarily preclude you
Oh, wow.
from being considered. What carriers look for is compliance, you're doing what your doctor tells you, and stability. Whatever situation you currently have is stable, meaning your blood pressure readings are good, your A1C, if you're a diabetic, are not going up and down every time you visit the
Right,
doctor, because
right.
they will purchase your medical records and typically go back 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
For example, someone who has sleep apnea and is required to have a CPAP machine, if it's documented in their medical records, doc, I can't sleep with that. I'm not using it. They'll deny you. They won't even. I mean, you could be a triathlete,
Yeah.
but if you're not compliant with your CPAP machine, no carrier will approve you.
Wow. That's interesting. I think it's also interesting that people are unaware that these plans are customizable to you, not, it's not a one fits all, one program fits all.
Without a doubt. I mean, and that's why, for example, one traditional policy that I work with, you could have a bag of money for your lifetime as low as $50,000 up to $500,000.
Wow.
In $1,000 increments.
Yeah.
And your monthly benefit that draws from that can be in $100 increments. So it is, there are no two people have the same, the same issues,
Right.
your needs, health, even between a spouse. Sometimes the carrier that I might recommend is not the same
Oh, for both.
for both.
Okay.
It could be based upon their health.
Right.
Also, talking about policies, there are ways that a lot of times people have life insurance policies that maybe they don't need anymore because of where they are in their stage of life.
Okay.
And there's something called a 1035 exchange that allows you to access the cash value that you have built up in that life policy and transfer it tax-free to pay for a new long-term
yeah.
care policy.
Yeah.
And then also, going back to the question that you said about, well, what if I can't afford it down the road? Some policies allow single payments, or payments over 5 years, or payments over 10 years, and then
Okay.
you're done.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that existed. So why do you think that it's something that people overlook on a traditional basis? Meaning, I hear everything you're saying, it sounds great to me, makes sense, life insurance makes sense, long-term care makes sense, but why do you think people just refuse? Or are apprehensive? I shouldn't say refuse.
Well, you hit on one note where they may have heard, stories about, how expensive it might be, or that grandma had a policy and she paid for it all those years and she was in a nursing home and the policy wouldn't pay.
Right.
Well, years ago, there were home care only policies.
Right.
So if she had a home care only policy, it certainly would not pay for a nursing home.
Right.
Or vice versa.
Right.
Okay, today, any policy, any tax qualified policy, and that means when you receive the benefits, they're federally tax free.
Right.
They have to cover all venues of care. home care, adult daycare, assisted, memory.
Now, how do they cover that? So if my mom is at home and needs home health care, or I've seen where, you know, we put her into an adult daycare program, how do we access those funds?
Okay. Well, this is the benefit trigger for tax qualified long-term care plans is HIPAA regulated. And if because of a chronic illness, a disability, or cognitive impairment, if you need help with 2 of 6, what they call activities of daily living, or ADLs, bathing, dressing, eating, toileting, transferring, and continence, pretty much other than continence, our daily maintenance, our morning routine.
Right.
If you're cognitively impaired, it's automatic.
Okay.
But if it's more physical, you need help with 2 of those 6. And that help can either be hands-on, where they're actually helping you, or supervisory.
Okay.
Certified by typically your PCP or any licensed professional, and it's expected to last 90 days or longer.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily have to, but the expectation has to be there. So if you're playing softball this weekend and you slide into home base, and you know you wrench up your ankle badly and you're laid up for two weeks or more in bed, you'd need help with 5 of those ADLs,
Right.
but it wouldn't be a benefit trigger.
Right.
But God forbid you're in an auto accident, hospital, rehab, and the doctor says, here's the good news, you can go home. The not so good news is you're not getting out of bed for 4 to 6 months.
Right.
That would be, you know, a benefit.
And
trigger.
is it as easy as picking up the phone and getting that benefit to be triggered?
Yes, there is a process. You know, all carriers have 800 numbers and care coordination services. All carriers ask for a written plan of care from your doctor
Okay.
and you. So it's not like, you know, pick up the phone, send me my money.
Right.
Okay, there is a process, but it's, I mean, companies pay out billions of dollars, you know, in claims, you know, especially now with, you know.
With baby boomers,
With the boomers,
absolutely.
yes.
It is incredible. Our show is coming to an end, but is there anything that you would like to state to the audience that you feel is imperative that we haven't discussed, or that you really feel should be emphasized?
I think just don't be in denial, to be honest with you. Just don't be in denial. Accept the fact that it could happen to you. And we all know that the best decisions are made ahead of time, when everyone's calm,
Right.
they have all the information, and they need to make an informed decision. Versus when it hits the fan, it's chaotic and you're reactive. So it's better to be proactive than reactive.
And I'm sure that you get those phone calls at the very end. We call them emergency plans. At the very end, what happens at that point?
Well, for example, many times, you know, they'll say, I want to look at a policy for my mother. Well, I mean, if you are needing help with those ADLs, you're uninsurable.
Right.
You know, so again, you're never as young and as healthy as you are.
Well,
today.
and I think that's probably the most important, if we can get it across, the most important tidbit of information, and I agree with you 100%, education's key. This morning, I received a phone call from a gentleman saying, my mother needs to go into a nursing home today. Can we put a trust together for her? And I wish it was that easy. And the question is, how long does it take to get this rolling? Just like your longevity plan. How long does it take? Well, you can't wait until it's the 11th and a half hour
That's right.
to do it.
You don't call to get homeowners when your house is on fire.
Right, absolutely.
And if I may, if I can give the audience my contact information.
Absolutely.
Again, my name is Michael Osilka. My phone number is 412-848-1065. And my email is michael.ltcepp@gmail.com.
Well, thank you, Michael. I appreciate you being here. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. But I think education is always the most important, especially when it comes to our health, it comes to becoming ill, passing away. These things are inevitable, let's be honest,
Quite.
and should be taken care of. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate
being
the
here.
opportunity to be
Yes.
with you. Thanks.
Yes, very good. Thank you.